I still remember the smell of the old attic the day I found it. Dust, wood, and something almost sacred, the kind of air that holds memories no one dares disturb. My father had been gone for 6 months, and even though everyone told me to move on, I couldn't. He wasn't just my father. He was my anchor, my safe place, the only person who ever made me feel truly seen. That morning, I climbed the attic stairs just to feel close to him again, to maybe find a forgotten scent of his cologne. But instead, I found something that made my heart stop. Inside an old metal box buried under faded photographs was an envelope with my name written in his handwriting, steady, clear, and undeniably his. My breath caught in my chest. My hands trembled as I picked it up, feeling the texture of the paper, yellowed by time but strangely warm. I sat down on the cold floor, sunlight cutting through the wooden boards, and opened it carefully. The moment I unfolded the letter, my eyes froze. The ink was fresh, the words sharp, the date at the top, June 12th, next year. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake, that maybe he'd written it long ago and just dated it wrong. But the pen marks, the ink, the smell of it, it was new. My father had died months ago. How could this be? My pulse raced. I read the first line over and over again, trying to make sense of it. If you're reading this, then time has done what I couldn't. My heart dropped into my stomach. Every sentence felt like he was talking to me now, from beyond the grave, from a place where clocks didn't matter. He wrote about things that hadn't happened yet, details of moments that hadn't existed, but would. And one sentence, written in bold letters, burned into my mind. Do not ignore the date. Everything starts then. I didn't know whether to scream, cry, or laugh. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as if the walls themselves were listening. Could it be a trick? Could someone have written this to torment me? My father wasn't the kind of man to believe in strange things. Yet this letter felt like something he'd been waiting for me to find, like it was meant to reach me not when he lived, but after he was gone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the letter until dawn, every word echoing inside my head. Everything starts then. What did that mean? What was supposed to happen on that date? My father was gone, but suddenly, I felt like he wasn't. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't really slept, my mind still trapped in that attic, replaying every word of that impossible letter. I kept thinking about the date, June 12th. It was 8 months away. Why that day? What was supposed to start? I needed answers, but I didn't know where to look. My father had always been a rational man, a professor, a man of science, someone who dismissed anything that couldn't be proven. So why would he write a letter that seemed to defy logic and time itself? I decided to visit his old study, the one room in the house I had avoided since the funeral. The moment I opened the door, the smell of old books and cedar rushed at me like a ghost from my childhood. His desk was exactly how he'd left it, tidy, almost obsessively so. Every pencil sharpened, every notebook aligned. I ran my fingers over the surface, hoping to feel something. But instead, I found another envelope. This one didn't have my name. It was sealed with red wax, something he never used. My hands shook as I picked it up. There was no date, no address, nothing. Only one word written in his handwriting. Wait. It felt like the world was mocking me. Wait for what? For the date in the letter? For a sign? I placed it back down and sat in his chair. The leather was cold, yet somehow I felt him there. I closed my eyes, and for a split second, I could almost hear his voice, calm, patient, teaching me like he always did. There are things, my dear, that science hasn't yet found the courage to explain. That phrase, he'd said it once when I was a child, after my mother's death. She had passed away suddenly, and he'd never spoken about it again. But now, with this letter, that sentence came back to haunt me. I started digging through his notebooks, searching for clues. His handwriting was everywhere. Formulas, strange diagrams, timelines with future dates, as if he had been tracking something invisible. My breath quickened as I turned the last page of one of his journals and saw a line underlined twice. When the clocks stop, the truth begins. The words made no sense, yet they felt like a warning. My father was trying to tell me something, something bigger than death, something he couldn't explain while alive. That night, when I went to bed, I couldn't stop thinking about that phrase. I looked at the letter again, the same date, the same words glowing in my mind. And then, at exactly midnight, something happened. Every clock in the house stopped. The ticking died. The silence was absolute. I felt it in my bones, as if time itself was holding its breath. I stared at the motionless hands of my bedside clock and whispered, "Dad, what did you do?" That night, I couldn't move. The silence after the clocks stopped was so heavy it felt alive, pressing against my chest, making every breath harder. I checked my phone, my wristwatch, even the oven clock, all frozen at 0 o'clock, every single one. I felt my pulse racing, but the world itself was still. I whispered my father's name, almost afraid of hearing an answer. "Dad?" The only response was the creak of the floorboards, slow and deliberate, as if someone else was in the house. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echo in the quiet. I grabbed the letter again, running my fingers over the date. June 12th, the same day that would come months later. But now, something strange had changed. The ink looked darker, fresher. I could have sworn it wasn't like that before. I brought it closer to the light, and I saw something faint. A barely visible sentence written under the first line, almost hidden by pressure marks. I tilted the paper until the light hit perfectly. My blood ran cold as I read it. "Listen when time stands still." I turned on the lamp, desperate for meaning. I didn't know if it was madness or grief, but I started speaking aloud. "Dad, I'm listening. Please, just tell me what this means." For a few seconds, there was nothing, just stillness. Then a faint humming filled the room, low and mechanical, like an old radio tuning between stations. It came from the corner of the room, near the dresser where my father's watch rested. That same watch he wore every single day before he died. I picked it up. The hands were stopped, frozen like the others, but the second hand trembled slightly as if trying to move. The noise grew louder, and then a voice. It was faint, distant, but unmistakable. My father's voice. "If you can hear this, you found it too early." My knees gave out. I dropped to the floor, clutching the watch like it was the only thing keeping me alive. His voice came again, clearer this time, trembling with emotion. "It's not the end, my dear. It's the beginning." Tears flooded my eyes. My father had been gone for months. I'd watched his coffin lower into the ground, felt the weight of the earth closing over him, and yet his voice was here. Real. Present. My body shook between fear and desperate longing. "Dad, how?" I whispered. "What is this?" But the watch went silent again. The second hand stopped moving completely, and I was left in the stillness of a house where time had stopped, holding a dead man's words in my hands. I didn't know if I was losing my mind, or if my father had somehow found a way to cross the line between worlds. But one thing was certain, whatever he meant by the beginning, it wasn't over. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again, faint, echoing, replaying in my head like a broken recording. "It's not the end. It's the beginning." Morning light crept through the curtains, but it didn't bring peace. My home felt different, charged, as if invisible threads of memory hung in the air. The clocks still didn't move. I tried to reset them, even change the batteries, but every hand stayed still at midnight. It was as if time itself refused to continue until I understood. The watch sat on my nightstand, gleaming faintly under the sunlight. I stared at it, terrified to touch it, terrified not to. My father's voice. It couldn't have been a hallucination. I'd heard his warmth, the slight rasp in his tone, the way he paused when choosing his words. It was him. Completely him. I needed to know what was hidden behind that message, so I did what he always taught me to do: observe, think, search for the pattern. I brought the watch to his old study. Every wall was lined with his notes and equations, fragments of thoughts only he could understand. One notebook lay open on the desk, and suddenly something caught my attention. A small, hand-drawn symbol that looked exactly like the back of the watch. My chest tightened. I turned the watch around and saw the same engraving, almost invisible under years of wear. My father had drawn this. He'd planned it. I grabbed a magnifying glass and looked closer. Tiny letters were etched along the inner rim, so small, they almost disappeared into the metal. I traced them with my finger and read them aloud. Follow the seconds that don't exist. My hands trembled. I didn't know what that meant until I looked at the clock on the wall. It was frozen at midnight, but the watch's second hand began to twitch again, skipping one beat every 5 seconds, moving only when I spoke his name. "Dad," I whispered. Anne jumped once. "Please, tell me what you want me to do." The hand moved again, 1 second forward. I felt cold tears roll down my cheeks. He was responding. I spoke again, voice shaking. "If you can hear me." "I'm listening." The watch ticked once more and stopped, resting on the same mark every time. It pointed to a number. 12. The same number on the date of the letter. The same time when the world had frozen. June 12th. My father hadn't just written the letter. He'd left a trail, a coded message across time itself. I didn't understand how, but I felt it deep inside. He wasn't warning me. He was preparing me. Something was coming on June 12th. Something that my father knew would change everything. For the next few days, I couldn't think of anything else. Every sound in the house felt connected to that letter, every silence heavier than the last. I tried to go back to work, to pretend life was normal, but I couldn't. The letter, the stopped clocks, the voice in the watch, they weren't coincidences. My father had left me a message, a warning, and maybe a mission. I began to study every page of his old journals, tracing his thoughts, his experiments, his research, and what I found made my skin crawl. He'd been studying time, not just physics, not clocks or relativity, but something deeper. He wrote about the fold, a concept he described as the thin line between memory and existence. One passage read, "The human mind can be trapped in a moment if emotion anchors it there." Another said, "Some memories live longer than the people who created them." I didn't understand what any of it meant. But then, I found a note addressed to me, half-finished and written in trembling handwriting. "If something happens to me, don't fear the 12th. Fear what comes after." I pushed the chair back, trembling. The 12th again. Always the 12th. I looked at the calendar. June 12th, circled in red ink. That date was only 7 months away. I tried to remember if it had ever meant anything before. A birthday? An anniversary? But nothing came. And then, as I sat in that silent room, the air grew colder. The kind of cold that doesn't come from temperature, but from something else. Something wrong. The watch on the table ticked once, on its own. I grabbed it, heart racing, and whispered, "Dad?" The second hand spun wildly, faster and faster, until it stopped again, pointing straight up, frozen at 12. And then, a faint vibration ran through the floor. My father's framed photograph fell from the shelf and hit the ground, the glass cracking perfectly in half. I picked it up, shaking, and that's when I saw it. Something written on the back in his handwriting, faint but unmistakable. "She knows the truth. Ask her before it's too late." I didn't know who she was, but I had a feeling deep inside that I already did. There was only one person who had been close to my father in his final months. Someone who refused to talk about what they'd worked on together. His assistant, Clara. I hadn't seen her since the funeral. I didn't want to. But now, I had no choice. It took me 2 days to gather the courage to call her. Clara had always been kind but distant, a woman who lived in the shadows of my father's brilliance. I found her number in one of his old address books and dialed, my heart pounding like a trapped bird. The phone rang 4 times before a soft, trembling voice answered. Hello? For a moment, I couldn't speak. I just listened to her breathing. Then I whispered, Clara. It's me, Daniel's daughter. There was silence. A long, uncomfortable silence. Then a single word that sent chills down my spine. You found it, didn't you? I froze. Found what? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The letter, she said. Her voice cracked. He said you would. But not yet. Not this early. My grip tightened on the phone. Clara, I don't understand. What's happening? Why did my father date that letter for next year? There was another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear her weighing her words, deciding how much truth I could handle. Finally, she sighed, because he didn't write it before he died. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. What are you saying? I asked. He wrote it after? Yes, she whispered. At least, that's what he believed. My mind spun. That's impossible. He's dead. Clara's tone softened, almost pitying. You don't know what your father was working on, do you? He wasn't studying time, he was trying to speak through it. I sank into the chair, clutching the phone like it was the only thing holding me to reality. You're telling me he predicted his own death? Clara's voice trembled. Not predicted. Prepared. She told me about their last experiment, something my father called the Fold Project. A theory that memory could be transmitted through frequencies, bridging consciousness across moments in time. He believed time was not linear, she said, but layered, and that with enough emotional energy, you could send a message to yourself, or to someone you love. My body went cold. The letter, the voice, the clocks, it all started to make sense. He said, if the signal ever reached you, Clara continued, then something went wrong. Something he couldn't stop. I felt tears welling up, blurring the world around me. What went wrong, Clara? I whispered. She hesitated before answering. He wasn't the only one trying to do it. The line went silent. I could hear my own heartbeat in the void. Clara? I whispered again, panic creeping into my chest. Clara, are you there? A faint sound came through the line. A whisper, low and broken, barely audible. They're listening. Then the call disconnected. I sat there frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, the dial tone screaming into the silence. Whoever they were, I suddenly understood. This wasn't just about a letter anymore. My father had opened a door, and something had followed him through. That night, I couldn't stop replaying her words. He didn't write it before he died. I walked around the house like a ghost, haunted by every tick that wasn't there, by the silence that seemed to breathe. I checked my phone, tried calling Clara again, but her number was suddenly disconnected. I even searched her name online, but there was nothing. No address, no job, no record. It was like she had never existed. My hands shook as I sat down on the floor beside my father's old study, the air colder than usual, the watch on my wrist completely still. I whispered to the empty room, Dad, what did you do? I didn't expect an answer, but I got one. The light in the study flickered once, twice, then stayed dim, as if something invisible was breathing through it. The watch started ticking again, slowly, painfully, each tick echoing through the room like a heartbeat. My father's voice returned, faint, distorted, but undeniably his. Don't trust the silence, he said. I froze. "Dad?" I whispered. The second hand twitched faster. "They found me," he continued, his tone filled with fear. "But you still have time." Then the ticking stopped. I stood up, dizzy, terrified, tears stinging my eyes. My father's voice wasn't calm or comforting this time. It was desperate, afraid. I ran to the window and looked. Outside, nothing. Just the quiet street under a pale moon. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark, clutching the letter. The ink shimmered under the faint glow of the street lamp, and that's when I saw it. A new sentence that hadn't been there before. "If she disappears, find the signal. She, Clara." My chest tightened. How could new words appear on an old letter? Was it reacting to time, or to me? I took out my father's journals again, flipping through pages filled with notes about resonance, memory fields, and quantum frequency. And then I found something that stopped me cold. A small photograph of Clara and my father standing beside a large device covered in cables and wires. Written on the back were the words, "Test 7, the day we heard her." Her. Who was her? My mind swirled. Maybe it wasn't Clara at all. Maybe there was another voice, another consciousness trapped between these moments. My father's theory of time wasn't just about sending messages. Maybe it was about receiving them too. Then, from the silence, a sound began. Faint, rhythmic, coming from the walls. Not a knock, not a step. It was ticking. But this time, the sound didn't come from the watch or the clocks. It came from inside the house. Every wall pulsed with it, like the heartbeat of something that wasn't supposed to exist. I whispered, trembling, "Dad, what did you let in?" The ticking grew louder with every passing minute, echoing through the walls like a pulse, deep, steady, almost human. I pressed my ear to the plaster and felt vibrations, faint but real, as if something were alive inside the structure of the house itself. I whispered, "Dad, if this is you, please stop." But it didn't. The rhythm continued, irregular, impatient, as though trying to communicate. Then, all at once, the lights flickered violently and went out. I was left in complete darkness. My breath quickened. The air turned heavy, dense, and cold enough to sting my skin. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and turned it on. The beam shook in my trembling hand, slicing through the black. That's when I noticed something impossible. On the walls, faint outlines, as if drawn in light, appeared what looked like diagrams. Circles, numbers, arrows all over the plaster. My father's handwriting. I knew it instantly. The same slanted letters from his journals, now carved in shimmering patterns across my home. I took a step closer, tracing one of the glowing lines with my finger. It pulsed under my touch, and then I heard it. A whisper, soft and familiar. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." I froze. "Dad?" My voice cracked. The flashlight flickered again, and for a second I saw a shadow, tall, still, standing at the end of the hallway. My heart stopped. I blinked, and it was gone. The air hummed, the light diagrams on the wall began to fade, and the ticking stopped completely. Silence. Then, from the floor, something metallic glinted. I knelt down and found a small key, old, brass, engraved with a number 12. June 12th again. It haunted everything. I didn't know where the key belonged, but I felt its weight in my hand, heavy with meaning. I went to my father's study, searching through every drawer, until I found a small locked box I had never been able to open. The key slid in perfectly. My pulse raced as I turned it. The lock clicked, the lid creaked open, and inside was an old cassette tape labeled only with the words for her. I didn't have a cassette player anymore, but I remembered one buried in the attic among his things. I ran up the stairs, the floorboards groaning under my feet, every step echoing like a warning. I found the dusty player, plugged it in, and pressed play. At first, just static. Then his voice, trembling, tired, but unmistakably my father's. If you're hearing this, the fold has opened. You must leave the house before midnight. They'll come when time stands still. My throat tightened. Who's coming? I whispered to the dark, but the tape continued. You'll know them by the silence. Remember, my dear, they don't exist in time, but they remember you. The tape clicked off. I sat there, frozen, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The air grew cold again, and the world around me went still. Every clock in the house froze. Midnight. If you were me, would you leave the house immediately or stay to find what your father meant by they? Tell me in the comments. The moment the clocks froze at midnight, I felt it again. That suffocating stillness, the kind that presses against your skin and fills your lungs with dread. My flashlight dimmed, flickering weakly as if struggling to exist. I whispered to myself, it's just my imagination, but the air told me otherwise. The silence was different this time, not empty, but aware. It was as if something in the house was listening, watching, waiting. I backed toward the attic door, still clutching the cassette player. Every instinct screamed to run, but I couldn't. My father's words echoed in my head. You'll know them by the silence. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the hallway below. The boards creaked one at a time, steady and heavy, like someone trying not to be heard but failing. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. I turned off the flashlight, holding my breath. The steps stopped. For a long minute, there was nothing. Then, a whisper so close it brushed my ear. Why are you still here? I spun around, the beam of my light shaking across the empty attic. No one. My legs trembled. Dad? I whispered. My voice was swallowed by the silence. Then, from behind a stack of boxes, something shifted. The sound was faint, but distinct. A drag, like fabric sliding across wood. I shone the light toward it, and for a heartbeat, I saw something that shouldn't exist. A shape, faint, human-like, but blurred, as if out of focus with reality itself. The air around me pulsed, vibrating softly, and then I heard more voices, overlapping whispers, familiar tones layered together. My mother's laugh, my grandmother's sigh, even my own voice, crying from years ago. They weren't ghosts, they were memories, alive, speaking all at once, tangled in the air. My father's theory came back to me. Time is layered, not linear. I finally understood. The fold wasn't a doorway to the dead. It was a fracture between moments, and somehow my father had torn it open inside this house. The shapes moved closer, flickering like film stuck between frames. My hands shook uncontrollably. "What do you want?" I screamed. The voices stopped. And then one single phrase, clear, chilling, and unmistakable, came from all directions at once. To finish what he started, I ran. Down the stairs, through the hall, past the stopped clocks that reflected my pale, terrified face. The front door wouldn't open. No matter how hard I pulled, it stayed locked, as if the world outside no longer existed. I turned and saw the faint outline of someone standing at the end of the corridor. Taller than my father, darker than the shadows. That's when I realized maybe my father hadn't meant for me to hear his message. Maybe he was trying to warn me not to. I ran to the front door again, slamming my hands against the handle, screaming until my throat burned. But it didn't move. Not even an inch. It was as if it had become part of the wall itself, sealed by something that wasn't supposed to exist. My pulse thundered in my ears as the house groaned around me, the wood flexing and cracking like it was breathing. I turned around, and the figure at the end of the hallway was still there, motionless, almost blending into the darkness. I couldn't see its face, but I could feel its gaze. It wasn't human. It wasn't even alive in the way we understand life. "Dad?" I screamed, voice breaking. "Please, help me." And that's when I heard it again, the soft hum of his voice, distant but clear, coming from the watch on my wrist. "Don't let them touch you," he said. "You're not safe in the present." I looked down. The watch hands had started spinning backward, faster and faster, blurring into a whirl of light. The air rippled. The shadows shifted. And then, everything around me changed. I wasn't in my house anymore. Or maybe I was, but not in my time. The furniture was different. Older. The air smelled of dust and rain. The photographs on the walls were gone, replaced by unfinished sketches and equations pinned in place. I recognized the room, my father's study, but decades before I was born. I whispered his name, Dad. And a voice answered from behind me, "You shouldn't be here yet." I turned. My father stood there, alive. His hair was darker, his eyes sharp but tired, and his expression, fear, mixed with love. My body froze. I wanted to run to him, to hold him, to believe it was real. "Is it really you?" I asked. He nodded slowly. "I'd told you not to open the letter until the right day." I stepped closer, tears streaming down my face. "What's happening? Why did you bring me here?" He shook his head. "I didn't bring you." "They did." He walked past me, his movements fast, frantic. He picked up the same notebook I'd found months later, only now it was half written. "You have to go," he said. "They exist between time, feeding on unfinished moments. The more you remember, the stronger they become." My knees buckled. Then what was the letter for? His eyes met mine, full of sorrow. "To warn you. To keep you from becoming one of them." Before I could ask more, the air shimmered again. The walls began to dissolve and my father's voice became distant, fading like a dream slipping away at dawn. "Find the 12th," was all I heard before everything went dark. When I opened my eyes, I was back in the house, the same darkness, the same silence. But now, the figure was gone. And the clocks? They were ticking again, all except one, the watch on my wrist frozen exactly at 12 o'clock. I woke on the floor of the study, drenched in sweat, trembling from the memory of what I'd just seen. My father's voice still echoed in my mind. They exist between time. Every clock in the house ticked perfectly again, except the watch. That one stayed frozen, its second hand pointing straight to 12, as if waiting for permission to move. I tried to stand, but my legs felt weak. The air was heavy, humming with the residue of something not meant for this world. I looked at the window. The night outside was still and dark, but the stars looked wrong, as if they'd been rearranged. I whispered, "Dad, what did you mean by find the 12th?" The words felt like a plea. I picked up his old notebook, flipping to the final page I hadn't noticed before. It was blank, or so I thought. As I tilted it toward the lamp, faint letters appeared, written in what looked like pencil, but too delicate to have lasted decades. "The 12th isn't a day. It's a door." My skin prickled. The 12th wasn't June 12th. It wasn't a date at all. It was something hidden inside this house, waiting for me to open it. I searched every wall, every floorboard, every corner of his study. And then, behind an old bookshelf I'd never dared to move, I found it. A thin outline in the wall, perfectly rectangular, almost invisible. My father's handwriting was etched faintly beside it. Just one word. Fold. My breath caught. I touched it, and it was warm. The closer I leaned, the louder the hum became, deep, electric, and alive. The watch on my wrist vibrated. My father's voice, faint and trembling, came through again. "Not yet. You're not ready." I stepped back, shaking. "Ready for what?" I whispered. The hum stopped. The air went still again, so still that I could hear my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I turned off the light, thinking I was imagining things, but then the outline on the wall began to glow. A dim white light seeped from its edges, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. My instinct screamed to stop, to leave the house, to never come back. But curiosity, or maybe something stronger, pulled me closer. I pressed my palm against it and the wall moved. Not broke. Not cracked. Moved. The surface rippled like water, and a surge of cold air washed over me. I stumbled backward, heart racing. The watch ticked once, then again. The sound echoed through the room like a countdown. And then I heard footsteps. Behind me. Slow. Heavy. Deliberate. I turned, but no one was there. Only my father's photograph on the wall, and his eyes, I swear, were looking directly at me. I stood there, frozen, the sound of my own heartbeat pounding louder than anything else. The door, or whatever it was, pulsed softly, like it was breathing. I whispered, "Dad, is this what you meant?" And the glow around the frame brightened, answering me in silence. I wanted to believe it was him on the other side, waiting, calling me through the space between time. But deep inside, I could still hear his warning. "You're not ready." My hands trembled, torn between fear and longing. For months, I'd lived haunted by his words, by unanswered questions, and now the answers were right here, hiding behind a wall that shouldn't exist. I reached out again, pressing my fingers to the glowing surface. It felt alive, warm, pulsing faintly beneath my skin. The hum grew louder, vibrating in my bones. The watch on my wrist ticked once more, and suddenly I wasn't in the study anymore. The walls dissolved into a swirl of light and darkness, like falling through water made of memories. My breath caught in my throat. Then, through the haze, I saw him. My father, standing just a few feet away, exactly as I remembered. His glasses, his tired eyes, that calm smile that once made me feel safe. "Dad." My voice broke. I stepped closer, and he lifted a hand as if to stop me. "You shouldn't have opened it yet," he said, his voice trembling with both fear and love. "You've crossed into the fold. Time doesn't belong to you here." Tears filled my eyes. "I just wanted to understand. I just wanted to see you again." He shook his head slowly. "This isn't life, my dear. This is the echo of what I was. You're walking through memory, not reality." I tried to reach him, but the air between us rippled, pushing me back. "Then why leave the letter? Why call me here?" I cried. His face fell. "Because I needed you to stop them. They've learned to move through the fold, too." My stomach dropped. "Who?" He stepped closer, the space between us flickering like a dying film reel. "The ones who fed on my experiments, the voices you've been hearing. They exist where time breaks. You must close the fold before they find the door." My pulse raced. But how? He placed his hand on his chest and whispered, "The watch. It's the key. It can reverse the current." Before I could ask anything else, a loud crack echoed through the light. My father's expression changed. Fear. "They're here," he whispered. The air darkened behind him and shadows began to twist, forming figures without faces. I screamed his name, but he was already fading. His last words reached me like a breath in the storm. "When the 12th strikes, end it." And then I was back in my father's study. The glow was gone. The wall was solid again. Only the watch on my wrist kept ticking, faster, louder, like it was counting down. I looked at the clock. It was 11:58. The ticking grew unbearable, sharp, frantic, echoing like a heartbeat that belonged to something else. Every second was faster than the one before. I stared at the watch, my pulse sinking with its rhythm, feeling it crawl under my skin. 11:59. I had 1 minute left. My father's words repeated in my mind. When the 12th strikes, end it. I didn't know how. I didn't even know what it truly was. The fold? The house? The watch itself? But deep down, I felt something ancient stirring, something that had waited too long to be found. The room started to hum, just like before, but this time it wasn't just the walls. The sound came from inside me, from my bones, my blood. Every clock in the house ticked in perfect unison, the rhythm so loud it made the floor vibrate. I fell to my knees, clutching my head, whispering my father's name. "Dad, please, tell me what to do." But no voice came, only the ticking. Then, one by one, the clocks began to stop. The sound died slowly, like a heartbeat fading into silence. And in that silence, they came. The air bent, warping the space around me, and the shadows began to move. The same shapes I'd seen in the attic, tall, formless, flickering between light and darkness, now surrounded me. They whispered in dozens of voices at once, all too familiar. My father's, my mother's, my own. "Finish what he started," I screamed, backing away, clutching the watch to my chest. "No! You used him! You used me!" The floorboards cracked beneath me as one of the figures stepped closer, its outline flickering like static. I could see through it, a blur of memories and faces trapped inside. Then I understood. They weren't ghosts. They were moments. Fragments of lives, emotions, regrets, everything my father's machine had pulled from the fold. The more he tried to connect with the past, the more he tore it apart. And now, those pieces wanted me too. "End it," I whispered. "End it before it consumes everything." My father's words were no longer a mystery. The watch wasn't just a key. It was the anchor keeping the fold open. I gripped it tightly, tears streaming down my face. "I'm sorry, Dad," the figures screamed, a sound like glass shattering inside my mind. I twisted the crown of the watch backward, hard, the metal cutting into my fingers. The light exploded through the room, blinding, cold, pure. Time itself folded, collapsing inward like a dying star. Every sound, every whisper, every heartbeat was sucked into the white void until there was nothing left but silence. When I opened my eyes, I was on the floor again. The air was still, warm, and the light of morning filled the room. The watch lay beside me, cracked, its hands finally at rest. All the clocks were working again, the hum was gone, the shadows were gone, and for the first time in months, the silence felt human. But as I reached for the broken watch, I saw something carved into its back, words that hadn't been there before. "You did it, my dear. But remember, time never forgets." The ticking turned into thunder. Every beat from the broken watch echoed through my chest like a countdown I couldn't escape. 11:59 and 40 seconds. The light in the study dimmed and I could feel the air thickening, vibrating like something huge was stirring beneath the floorboards. I looked at the wall, the same wall that once glowed with life, and it was pulsing faintly again, threads of silver light leaking through its cracks like veins. My father's words screamed inside my head. "When the 12th strikes, end it." But how do you end something that doesn't belong to this world? I clutched the watch tighter, its metal burning against my palm. My reflection in the glass warped, my face twisting, merging with something else. A second image appeared behind mine, my father's eyes. His voice filled the room, calm and final. "They're coming. You opened the door too far. You have one chance." Tears blurred my vision. "Tell me what to do," I shouted, my voice breaking. The air rippled, and suddenly the wall split open again, a burst of white light swallowing the room. The shadows returned. The same faceless figures from before, hundreds of them, spilling from the crack like smoke given form. They surrounded me, whispering in unison, the same dreadful phrase, "Time remembers." I stumbled backward, the watch glowing brighter with every second. Then, as the clock struck 12 o'clock, everything stopped. No sound, no breath, no heartbeat. Just silence, absolute and eternal. And in that silence, I saw him, My father, standing at the heart of the light, reaching out his hand toward me. "It has to be you," he said. "You have to close it." My hand trembled. "But if I do, I'll lose you again." His eyes softened with that same gentle pride I'd missed so much. "You already lost me, my dear. Don't let them take what's left of you." I bit back a sob. The shadows crept closer, their forms flickering with stolen memories. My childhood, my laughter, his voice teaching me how to ride a bike. They were devouring everything I'd ever been. I screamed and pressed the watch's crown inward, twisting it until my fingers bled. The air cracked like lightning. The world folded in on itself. Colors, sound, memory, collapsing into one blinding point of light. The figures screamed as they dissolved, their whispers fading into nothing. And in the middle of that chaos, my father smiled one last time. "Goodbye, my love." Then he vanished. When I awoke, it was morning. The wall was solid. The air was warm. Every clock ticked normally again except for one, the watch, now completely dark. I held it close to my chest and whispered, "Goodbye, Dad." Outside, the sun rose quietly, painting the house in gold. But somewhere deep inside, I knew the fold hadn't disappeared. It had only closed its eyes. I sat in the study, staring at the sunlight spilling across the floorboards. Everything was still, painfully, beautifully still. The house no longer breathed or whispered. It simply existed, the way it did before all of this began. The broken watch lay in my hand, its face cracked, but no longer ticking. It felt lighter now, almost empty, like it had finally released the weight of time itself. I traced my finger over the engraving my father left behind. "Time never forgets." The words cut deeper now, because even though I'd closed the fold, even though the voices were gone, I could still feel him. Not haunting me, but existing somewhere, maybe in the space between seconds, where love refuses to die. For days, I tried to live normally again. I cleaned the house, opened the curtains, even smiled when the neighbors greeted me. But sometimes, in the quiet hours of dawn, I'd hear a faint echo, a single tick. Not from the clocks, but from somewhere inside the walls. It was soft, patient, almost comforting. I told myself it was just the wood settling, but a part of me knew better. My father's experiment hadn't been a failure. He'd done it. He'd reached through time. And I had answered. But the cost was higher than either of us could have imagined. A week later, I decided to visit his grave. The cemetery was calm, bathed in golden light. I knelt beside his name, brushing the dirt from the stone. "I did what you asked," I whispered. I closed it. A warm breeze passed through the trees, stirring the fallen leaves. I smiled through my tears. "You were right, Dad. Time doesn't end. It learns." I stood to leave, but then I noticed something half buried near the grave, a small metallic shape catching the sunlight. I bent down and froze. It was another watch, identical to mine. Untouched, unbroken, its hands moving steadily. I picked it up, my breath caught between disbelief and fear. The second hand ticked perfectly, and then for a moment it stopped. Just long enough for me to see the time. 12 o'clock. The exact moment I'd closed the fold. The moment everything ended. Or maybe, the moment it began again. My hands trembled as I held it closer, and for the briefest second, I heard his voice one last time. "You can't stop time, my dear. You can only listen to it." The world felt still again. Not dead, not haunted, just alive. I walked away from his grave, the new watch ticking softly in my palm, a heartbeat between worlds. And though I didn't look back, I knew one truth would stay with me forever. My father didn't leave me a warning. He left me a way to remember him. If you finished this story and felt something, grief, love, or even hope, tell me in the comments what you would say if you could speak to someone you've lost. One last time,